Prince Harry and Meghan Markle are on edge. Harry and Meghan stepped out separately in New York, going their separate ways. Harry went one way, Meghan went the other way. I mean, it was not a huge surprise.
Meghan Markle standing there preaching about children's safety online is like Harvey Weinstein advocating for women's rights.
Did Meghan Markle and Prince Harry just get a shocking reality check that exposed the true state of their royal standing? Imagine the scene, the highly anticipated humanitarian awards, an event they undoubtedly saw as a pivotal moment for their carefully crafted public image, only to have a simple two-letter word shatter their plans. A private jet request, a seemingly minor logistical detail for global figures of their supposed stature, was flatly, unequivocally denied. No negotiation, no polite discussion, no room for exceptions, just a stark, unyielding no. This wasn't merely an inconvenience. It was a public humiliation, a stark reminder that even for those who once held sway within the monarchy, some doors are now firmly closed, revealing a truth no one, especially them, saw coming.
See her face. You get here, mate. But on stage, when they knew everyone was filming on their mobile phones and taking pictures, it got even worse.
The immediate aftermath was palpable, leaving even their meticulously assembled team of publicists and assistants utterly speechless. For perhaps the first time since their departure from royal duties, these self-proclaimed royal rebels were told, in no uncertain terms, that they were not special, and the blow landed with devastating force. This was meant to be Meghan's grand night of redemption, a perfectly orchestrated return to the global spotlight designed to silence critics and reassert their influence. Inside the opulent Park Hyatt suite, the air buzzed with nervous energy. Stylists, PR agents, and photographers moved with practiced urgency, rehearsing smiles that never quite reached their eyes. Meghan, ever the perfectionist, stood before a mirror, adjusting her designer gown for the 5th time, her whispers about camera angles and ideal lighting betraying a deep-seated anxiety. Meanwhile, Harry, a stark contrast, paced by the window, his gaze fixed on the glittering Manhattan skyline, as if the very city lights had betrayed their unspoken aspirations. The atmosphere was thick with a cinematic tension, one side of the room meticulously obsessed with optics and presentation, the other simmering with a barely contained fury over the unexpected rejection.
Body language. My God, no amount of PR spin is going to deal with that.
The organizers, with an almost defiant resolve, had rejected their private jet request, offering neither explanation nor compromise. For Harry, the refusal wasn't just a logistical headache, it was a profound personal humiliation, a direct challenge to his sense of dignity and perceived status. For Meghan, it was simply unthinkable. After all, what is a duchess without her grand triumphant entrance, free from the indignity of commercial travel? Inside that gilded suite, the carefully constructed illusion of their unshakable power and global adoration began to crack. The charity gala, which they had envisioned as their triumphant comeback, suddenly transformed into a stark, quiet reminder. The world, it seemed, no longer bowed to their every whim, yet this public rebuff was only the beginning of a far more complex unraveling. Officially, the narrative was straightforward. The Sussexes were attending the humanitarian awards to be honored for their global charitable contributions. The invitation itself was meant to be the ultimate mic drop, irrefutable proof that Meghan and Harry remained relevant, celebrated, and still the beloved couple the world once adored.
Maybe he is still very upset over her stunt over in Paris. I can't imagine that that didn't go unnoticed by him.
However, behind the scenes, Meghan wasn't preparing for a mere humanitarian event. She was meticulously staging a coronation. Every single detail had to scream Hollywood royalty, an undeniable declaration of their elevated status. Her gown, a show-stopping creation, had been hand-picked with the sole intention of outshining every other celebrity and dignitary in the room. Her team meticulously rehearsed every step, every camera angle, every flashbulb moment, ensuring absolute perfection. For Meghan, humility wasn't a virtue. It was just another aesthetic to be strategically deployed. The sheer absurdity of this over-the-top perfection surrounding her, even down to matching the dress code with an almost obsessive fervor, became a visible strain. Harry watched from across the room, arms folded, jaw locked. The same man who once spoke of desiring a simpler life now found himself utterly buried beneath his wife's relentless brand strategy. When she asked if the lighting was flattering enough, he offered no reply. When she reminded him, with a forced cheerfulness, to smile naturally, he didn't even look up. He had played this part for years, and the exhaustion was etched deeply onto his face. Behind the closed doors of their suite, their dynamic was no longer a partnership. It was a suffocating pressure, with Meghan endlessly chasing an applause that never quite materialized, and Harry slowly realizing he had traded a crown for a script he no longer believed in.
Simmering tension between the duplicitous Duke and his facelift-enhanced wife. Here's the red carpet arrival.
The air in the suite was already thick with unspoken tension, fractured by Meghan's clipped performative soundbites and Harry's barely audible murmurs of discontent. Their once charming smiles had long since become polished, empty masks, now visibly cracking under the strain. And then came her line, delivered with a practiced confidence, the one that finally made Harry lose his composure. Tonight, she declared, her eyes gleaming with a determined ambition. We remind them who we are. Harry's voice, low, bitter, and utterly unfiltered, cut through the room like a knife. No, Meghan, he retorted, his gaze meeting hers with a raw intensity. They already know who we are. That's the problem. In that devastating moment, the gilded royal fairy tale didn't just dim, it flickered and threatened to extinguish entirely, and the night hadn't even truly begun. When the news of the private jet denial finally broke inside that Manhattan suite, it wasn't just a logistical setback, it was a harsh, unyielding mirror. And what stared back at them wasn't royalty or global influence, it was unadulterated ego. Meghan's expression didn't register shock, it was pure disbelief, the kind only someone accustomed to endless approval and unquestioning deference could feel. The rejection, she slowly realized, wasn't about a mere jet, it was about the crushing understanding that her name, her title, no longer guaranteed an automatic yes. In the span of a few minutes, the perfectly curated illusion they had so painstakingly constructed began to crumble before their very eyes. Assistants froze, stylists averted their gazes, and the woman who once commanded red carpets with effortless grace suddenly looked as though she was standing on one that had just been unceremoniously rolled back, leaving her exposed and vulnerable.
Archie and Lily are just 6 and 4 years old. Luckily, still too young for social media, but we know that day is coming.
Now, Meghan, the actress, of course, had to stick to the script. And so we had the hilarious, she's trying to talk about the need to protect children from social media, even though she's pimping out her own children wherever she can, causing these tensions.
Every carefully orchestrated public appearance, every grand speech, every headline once designed to convey purpose had now devolved into a painful parody of itself. Harry, having once fled the gilded cage of Kensington Palace, found himself trapped in another of his own making, a self-constructed fortress built on Meghan's relentless pursuit of validation and his own gnawing guilt. For years, they had preached the virtues of compassion and environmentalism from the luxurious confines of private jets, demanded inviolable privacy while simultaneously selling intimate confessionals to the highest bidder, and championed freedom while seemingly shackled to the relentless pursuit of public relevance. The recent denial of their private jet request, far from being a mere logistical hiccup, felt like a powerful, undeniable stroke of poetic justice. Outside their carefully curated bubble, the organizers of the humanitarian event saw with stark clarity what the couple themselves seemed utterly blind to, a pair who had masterfully transformed genuine philanthropy into a calculated performance and sincere empathy into a cold, hard strategy. Their denial wasn't rooted in concerns for their safety. It was a firm rejection of the fundamental contradiction they had become, a stark antithesis to the very values the event sought to uphold. In the quiet solitude of that hotel room, a silence more profound than any tabloid expose finally exposed them for who they truly were. Two individuals utterly addicted to the spotlight, stripped bare of their usual script. There were no flashing cameras, no adoring red carpets, no carefully curated expressions of sympathy, just two ex-royals watching their meticulously constructed myth crumble under the sheer weight of its own artifice. While Meghan frantically clutched at the remnants of their fantasy, making another phone call, issuing another demand, Harry, in that moment of stark revelation, finally understood what the entire world had already grasped. They were no longer victims, they were unequivocally the spectacle. Markle. And this time, no royal palace or high-powered PR machine could possibly save them from the stark reality.
Got her arms flowing. She's really feeling her oats. Woman, please go back to California and be with your children and go and find a career other than just being desperate for attention every single day.
The private jet denial was far more than a simple scheduling conflict. It was a deliberate, calculated statement, resonating louder than any screaming tabloid headline could ever hope to achieve. For years, Meghan and Harry had meticulously crafted and inhabited their own compelling narrative, the misunderstood royals, the self-exiled saviors, the couple too authentic and principled for the stifling confines of the institution they had so dramatically abandoned. But this carefully constructed saga hinged precariously on a single fragile belief that people still genuinely saw them as different, as somehow above the fray. When the prestigious Humanitarian Awards Committee unequivocally refused their request for a private jet, that illusion shattered instantly. It was the industry's quiet, yet devastatingly clear, way of echoing what the public had already begun to whisper. The Sussexes no longer represented selfless service. They represented pure, unadulterated spectacle. Within the organizing committee, the choice had been starkly simple. How could an event founded on the principles of humility and genuine giving possibly justify lending a lavish private jet to a couple who had seemingly turned every noble cause into nothing more than a meticulously staged photo opportunity? Behind closed doors, one insider reportedly dubbed it ethical housekeeping. They craved authentic sincerity, not another brand activation. This decision, far from being a mere logistical hurdle, rippled outwards, signaling the definitive end of an era. The Sussex brand, once fueled by the intoxicating allure of rebellion, had morphed into a contradictory, self-serving, performative, and ultimately hollow entity. Meghan's famously calculated elegance could no longer conceal the profound exhaustion etched beneath her polished facade, and Harry's once passionate moral outrage had begun to look suspiciously like thinly veiled envy. As the news of the denial quietly spread through Manhattan's notoriously gossipy PR circles, something truly remarkable and utterly damning occurred. No one, absolutely no one, rushed to their defense. There were no frantic publicist emails, no sympathetic editorials penned by loyal media allies, no steadfast friends stepping forward to offer a word of support. The silence was not just noticeable, it was deafening, an eloquent, crushing indictment that spoke a truth far more profound than any spoken word.
Harry and Meghan will likely have their title stripped. I think they should have their title stripped. What is she doing for the monarchy? She's going to fashion shows with this horrible outfit, which looks like a bed sheet. Looks like she's wrapped in toilet paper.
The world, it seems, had finally drawn a definitive line in the sand, a stark demarcation that the Sussexes seemingly failed to perceive. It became clear that service rendered without genuine sincerity transforms into mere theatrics, and compassion devoid of true credibility reverberates as nothing more than empty noise. Harry and Meghan, unfortunately, had begun to embody both, their carefully constructed narratives and public appearances now appearing as a performance rather than authentic engagement. This wasn't just a royal fallout, it was a quiet, insidious exile into irrelevance, a fate far more chilling than any direct confrontation. In that silent erasure, the message was unmistakable. The world had undeniably moved on, leaving them behind. Their symbolic crowns had long since vanished, and with them the once captivated audience. Was the denial of their private jet a fair decision by the event organizers, a justified consequence, or merely another calculated public humiliation orchestrated against the Sussexes? What are your thoughts on this? Truly, while most celebrities eventually return to their authentic selves when the lights dim and the cameras cease their relentless gaze, Meghan and Harry, it appears, no longer remember who that self truly is. Every single scandal, every blazing headline, every meticulously planned public appearance has been meticulously stitched into a narrative so tightly controlled, so expertly polished, that even they have seemingly succumbed to its illusion. Meghan, the accomplished actress, now forever plays the role of the misunderstood icon, while Harry, the once rebellious prince, has been recast as the professional victim. Together, they inhabit a sprawling palace of mirrors, each reflection tailored for a different audience they've desperately tried to appease. Yet, here lies the profound irony. The more they curate, the less genuinely real they become. Their public displays of compassion begin to look overtly staged, their sincerity feels rehearsed, and their vulnerability, tragically, sells far better than any unvarnished truth ever could. What initially began as a mission to escape the suffocating confines of the crown has gradually morphed into an unrelenting crusade to replace it. And the private jet denial, that wasn't a punishment, it was a stark, unflattering reflection. The world in that moment finally held up a mirror that refused to flatter them, and for once, they couldn't look away. For Meghan, the true nightmare isn't rejection, it's the chilling specter of obscurity. For Harry, it's the dawning, painful realization that the war he believed he was valiantly fighting against the monarchy was in fact a deeply personal battle against himself. The anger, the defiance, the endless crusading, it's no longer rebellion, it has become a weary routine. Once, they proudly stood for independence. Now they stand as an embodiment of irony, preaching simplicity while relentlessly chasing spectacle, claiming humility while simultaneously demanding extraordinary privilege, and fighting for a nebulous truth while meticulously scripting every single frame of their lives. And that, in its essence, is the real tragedy. The crown didn't destroy them. The mirror did, because when you spend years performing authenticity, you gradually, irrevocably, forget how to simply be authentic. By the time they finally stepped into that waiting SUV for the awards, the applause they had so desperately chased had already faded, dying in the profound silence outside.
New York Times are finally realizing actually his wife might be a disaster tourist, but he is a disaster when it comes to charity, especially African charity, because he doesn't actually give a damn. For years and years and years, he used Africa because it was good for his PR.
Asterisk, 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 asterisk. Is the world finally growing weary of the endless royal drama, or do you believe the Sussexes will somehow manage to find a new path to bounce back into relevance? I am genuinely curious to hear your thoughts on this evolving saga. The perceived fall of the Sussexes wasn't a sudden, cataclysmic event that unfolded overnight. It was a slow, quiet, almost imperceptible erosion that occurred within the confines of an echo chamber where no one dared to speak an uncomfortable truth. Their once expansive world has progressively shrunk to a carefully curated circle of assistants, PR managers, and advisors whose very livelihoods and paychecks are inextricably tied to their unwavering agreement. Every single headline they dislike is immediately branded as a malicious smear campaign. Every perceived failure is conveniently blamed on jealousy or external forces. They no longer truly hear genuine criticism, only the pre-recorded, recycled sound of applause. Meghan, in particular, scrolls through endless media coverage, relentlessly hunting for validation like a vital, life-sustaining oxygen. When she stumbles upon a negative article, it's immediately treated as irrefutable proof of persecution. When she finds praise, it's triumphantly reposted as destiny itself. Every social media post, every carefully posed photo, every cause they champion becomes an integral part of the same self-referential echo, polished, hollow, and endlessly repeating. Harry is no better. The man who once bravely stood against the formidable institution of the monarchy now seems to hide behind another, equally rigid construct. The meticulously crafted brands they've built together. His once fiery rebellion has devolved into monotonous repetition, the same speeches, the same grievances, the same lingering ghosts of the past. His sincerity has curled into a predictable performance, and even he, it seems, can feel the worn edges of the script growing thin. Outside the gilded gates of their mansion, the world continues its relentless spin. New news stories break, fresh scandals erupt, and new faces rise to claim their fleeting moment in the spotlight. The crowds that once fervently shouted their names have long since moved on to the next captivating spectacle. But inside the Sussex echo chamber, the applause still plays on, recorded, recycled, and growing increasingly faint with each passing day. What they tragically fail to grasp is that fame doesn't die in spectacular flames. It dies in the quiet, lingering echoes. It fades layer by layer, imperceptibly, until the profound silence feels deafeningly louder than any noise they once chased. And that silence is here now, not imposed by the distant palace, nor ingeniously engineered by a hostile press, but created entirely by their own stubborn refusal to step out of their flattering mirror and confront the world as it truly is. Because in the end, the Sussex story isn't about grand betrayals or heroic bravery. It's about two individuals who tragically mistook their own reflection for genuine relevance. When the night finally descends, New York simply moves, as it always has, fast, indifferent, and utterly unforgiving. The highly anticipated humanitarian awards commenced, yet the usual spectacle surrounding the Sussexes was conspicuously absent. There were no private jets sweeping across the skyline, no grand, carefully curated entrance designed for maximum impact. Instead, a simple black SUV pulled quietly to the curb, unannounced, largely unnoticed, a stark departure from their past, almost as if their presence had become, dare we say, unimportant. Inside the opulent venue, the organizers offered polite but fleeting smiles. Photographers instinctively looked past them, and the typically buzzing crowd barely stirred. For what felt like the first time in years, Meghan and Harry walked into a room where the entire dynamic didn't revolve around their every move. No lenses swiveled in unison. No whispers trailed their every step. Their presence, once a command, had been reduced to a mere afterthought. The irony was palpable, almost surgical in its precision. They had arrived to celebrate compassion, yet the only emotion people seemed to feel towards them now was an overwhelming weariness. The glamour they projected felt forced, their smiles strained, hinting at a deep-seated hurt or even rebellion, while the sympathy they once garnered had curdled into an undeniable perception of arrogance and performance. And everyone, it seemed, could see it. Meghan's eyes almost instinctively scanned the room for cameras that simply weren't pointed her way. The silence between them, a heavy, unspoken truth, conveyed what no headline ever could. They were no longer feared or envied. They were conspicuously pitied. The evening unfolded with speeches that rightfully echoed for causes far greater than fleeting celebrity. Their names were mentioned, of course, but their legacy was not invoked. The humanitarian spotlight had definitively moved on, shining brightly on those whose work genuinely merited it. And when they quietly departed, the city itself seemed not to notice. The streets were wet, reflecting the city lights as their SUV disappeared into the anonymous flow of traffic, the vast night swallowing them whole, two silhouettes fading into a skyline that no longer acknowledged their once dominant presence. The previous denial of a private jet wasn't merely a logistical detail, it was profound symbolism. It marked the undeniable end of an illusion, the quiet death of entitlement, and the solemn, unceremonious burial of the Sussex brand as it once was. Perhaps they will choose to tell this story differently. Perhaps they'll spin it as an injustice, a result of envy, or simply bad luck. But the truth, stripped bare, is far simpler. The world for them had stopped clapping. If you want to understand how this intricate pattern of public perception began to unravel, make sure to watch our previous investigation, where Meghan's first husband, Joe Giuliano, reveals why his family ultimately rejected her. Because every story of a public downfall, after all, starts with one pivotal illusion. If you found this deep dive compelling, please hit that like button, subscribe to Star Spotlight for more truths hiding between the headlines, click the notification bell so you don't miss our next expose, and leave a comment below with your thoughts on this astonishing turn of events.